Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the coronavirus, America manipulated. We may or may not be talking with Trevor Loudon. If we don't connect with him, I'll tell you what he had to say. The coronavirus, numbers expose the mission, and coronavirus vaccine prescription explained. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned. I'm not hearing music, Matt.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
I'm Debbie Georgatos, and welcome to today's First Five. In this era of coronavirus, I want to do a very serious deep dive show today with a lot of information. As my mother used to say to us when we were growing up, if she had a lot of things to say, she'd line the kids up and she'd say, listen fast, because she wanted to go through a bunch of things. That's what I'm going to try to do today. I want to start in the first five to just make some overarching points and then play a couple of clips for you. Number one, about this coronavirus and America's reaction to the coronavirus. The numbers do not justify the reaction. That's my first point. Second point, leftists in America and our opponents around the world, our enemies around the world, from China to Russia and others, are enjoying seeing America weakened. The problem flowing from the shutdown of the economy is not just economic, it's not just lost jobs and lost paychecks. It is a weakening of America that the leftists in Washington and around the country and around the world are salivating over. Number three, there's very much in evidence a vaccine globalist mission. I've dived way more into this topic, and I want to share with you the ideas about how we are in some ways rejecting what seems to be working, what doctors around the world and in America are saying is working, in order to push the vaccine globalist agenda, which, even if you think vaccines are the best thing since sliced bread, is still a matter of interfering with America's freedom, interfering with the freedom of individuals to pursue the kind of healthcare they want. And number four, finally, America's leaders need the citizens to lead. We are needed in America, we citizens, we activists, to step up and lead. There is a tidal wave of fear, distortion, and manipulation, and it ends up in this precious country ignoring and downplaying things like hydroxychloroquine and other possible solutions to our detriment. But let me start the first five. And those are my big points. I'm going to come back to throughout the show several times. Then this first five, I wanted to share with you two clips when I say that America is being manipulated. The first is a woman. I want to have Matt the Wonderful, whom I deeply appreciate, doing this show from his home, as I'm doing the show from my home during this shutdown. But I want to hear you have Matt play for you a video. This was put up by CBS News. It is an individual woman, a nurse, talking about what she encountered at a hospital where she was working with respect to and trying to treat COVID-19 patients, people who contracted coronavirus and contracted COVID-19. I first will play the video and then we'll talk about it.
America is not prepared and nurses are not being protected. I quit my job today. I went into work and I was assigned to a COVID patient on an ICU unit that has been converted to a designated COVID unit. None of the nurses are wearing masks, not even surgical masks, in the hallways when they're giving report to each other. I had my own N95 mask. I told my manager, I understand we're short on supplies, but let me protect myself. Let me feel safe. I have family that I have to come home to, and the way things are looking, this isn't gonna get any better. America is not prepared, and nurses are not being protected.
People, that was put out. That's a woman, obviously a real woman, who made that video, put out by CBS News. They put the music behind it, the dramatic music, and the woman sobbing. And when I tell you in this first five, America is being manipulated, you need to know that that video is a complete farce. It is not true. There is, as you'll hear as we go along describing why I say it's not true, it would take it took people checking into it about 5 minutes on social media to uncover that this is a completely false story. Number one, the woman she did go back to work. The only true part is she went into work as a nurse for 1 day. She'd previously been a nurse. She took time off. She came back after a year, came into work for one day, brought her own mask with her, the mask that she wanted to use. And the hospital has a system that they wanted the nurses to use the mask that they have. They had plenty of masks on hand, plenty of masks available for nurses and other people dealing with the COVID-19 patients. This is a woman who she had, as a 1 day, she quit. She had previous to this posting of this hysterical video, she had posted on her own social media. She was suffering from anxiety and bipolar depression, and she was already feeling defeated, even before she went into her 1 day of work, or the day she went into work. She is now backtracking her story. She's saying, well, actually, there were plenty of masks. Everybody dealing with coronavirus patients, COVID-19 patients, had masks, but she was just upset because she wanted to use her own. And the hospital, quite understandably, I'm going to guess, said, you know what, actually, we have a system here. Everyone uses this. But understand the level of manipulation involved by the decision of CBS to decide to put this out as their tweet. What you saw was a tweet by CBS News, who professionalized this woman's farce, and to make her seem credible. And the reason I am telling you why this matters so much is because CBS News is invested in the agenda to urge people to believe that there is a crisis of the level that this nurse was complaining about, that this nurse actually went to work in a hospital and all of the nurses on the floor with the COVID-19 patients had no masks. Obviously, this plays into the left's agenda. CBS News puts this out. It takes, as I said, 5 minutes for some researcher online on Twitter to realize what the real story with this woman was, who's now backtracked. Second little clip I want to play in today's first five is a gentleman named, and I use that term loosely, Ezekiel Emanuel. If you're recognizing his name, he is Rahm Emanuel's brother. Ezekiel Emanuel is the one who helped write Obamacare, very much a leftist. But the important thing to remember about him, as you listen to what I'm about to play, is he is the one who said, with respect to Obamacare, that what they came to understand about America's medical system is that there needs to be more generosity on the part of Americans, older Americans, to stop taking medication, to get to a certain age. The age he floated was 75. Once you're 75, said Ezekiel Emanuel, stop wasting resources. You should not be using up the scarce medical resources we have in this country. Just seek palliative care, pain-killing care, and beside that, stop using resources, vowing he himself was going to do that because this is how he sees the medical system. This is a cold-blooded, evil guy. But I want you to now hear what he had to say in response in an interview. He's a doctor, by the way, in an interview related to the coronavirus epidemic we're experiencing right now. Here you have Ezekiel Emanuel.
COVID-19 virus. It threatens all of us. But while we are all experiencing the same pandemic, we are not experiencing it in the same way. The first dividing line is whether you or someone you love has gotten sick. Many Americans have not yet seen firsthand what devastation a positive test can inflict. Another dividing line is whether you have a job that lets you stay at home, working as you juggle childcare and video chats. 60 million Americans are still out there, not sheltering in place, and instead tirelessly working to keep everything going for the rest of us. You keep the electricity flowing and the internet running, food and groceries moving. You are putting your own health on the line to ensure the rest of us are living as normally as possible. And then there are the tens of millions of Americans who have lost jobs and businesses, or who fear that they're just about to. Your anxiety about the virus is coupled with worry over having a paycheck, covering the mortgage, keeping the lights on, and buying food. Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications. I know that's dreadful news to hear. How are people supposed to find work if this goes on in some form for a year and a half. Is all that economic pain worth trying to stop COVID-19? The truth is, we have no choice. If we prematurely end that physical distancing and the other measures, keeping it at bay, deaths could skyrocket into the hundreds of thousands, if not a million. We cannot return to normal until there's a vaccine. Conferences, concerts, sporting events, religious services, dinner in a restaurant, none of that will resume until we find a vaccine, a treatment, or a cure. One thing I've learned as a cancer doctor is that it's wrong to paint an overly rosy picture in order to maintain a patient's hope. It's wrong because it fails. It's false. Biology and disease are formidable opponents that inevitably tell us the truth. We cannot relieve the oppression of this pandemic until we are realistic. We need to prepare ourselves for this to last 18 months or so and for the toll that it will take. We need to develop a long-term solution based on those facts. It has to account for what we are losing while this fight goes on.
And that, my friends, is Ezekiel Emanuel. Let me summarize what he had to say. He is suggesting that in America, because we have the coronavirus epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, going on right now, that Americans should agree that all of us are going to continue to live under shelter in place, only essential businesses open, no non-essential travel out of your home rules until the vaccine is ready, which may be, as he says, between 12 and 18 months away. And I'm going to close out this first five by saying, actually a little note for production. We're doing this from home. I'm very grateful that we have Matt Stoker, my wonderful producer, doing this from his home. We didn't have the sound working from me in that interview. I've heard it enough times. I know what he said. We are going to our guest next. We are very, very fortunate today. We have Trevor Loudon joining us. I'm going to introduce him in a moment. I want to be sure you understand that if we have trouble with the sound, I'll let you know that. But to close out the first five, I want to make clear that people use the expression the coronavirus is a hoax. That is not true. There is a virus. We have a huge job to do to understand how it got started in China. Intentionally, non-intentionally, all the wrongdoing happened along the way is all something we'll figure out. But right now, the way the coronavirus problem in America is being handled is very much an intrusion on, an attack on liberty in America. And there is a need for citizens to follow this in more detail than maybe we have been, to understand that if we continue down the path that Ezekiel Emanuel is suggesting, we will simply destroy America. So, and that, my friends, is today's first five. So I mentioned before we started, we are at the start of the show. We have a guest joining us. Trevor Loudon is well known, I'm going to guess, to most of my listeners, but Trevor Loudon is, as many of you likely know, he's an author. He has a fabulous New Zealand accent, which is not why he's great, but it's fun to listen to. But he has an accent, but he is a true, genuine, researching, writing, blogging, speaking activist. He works very hard uncovering the truth about the networks of people who have power in our country, what is motivating people in our country to seek the policies they do. And the reason I want to talk with him today, we spoke a little bit over this past weekend, was I want him to talk to all of us about how the left in this country, the leftists in Washington in this country may actually be, not may, they are actually taking advantage of the weakness of the coronavirus, the economy in our country because of the shutdown related to the coronavirus. How much does that matter? Are we really just facing a vital, necessary response to a health problem? Or are we seeing this, can we see this and recognize this as also a political challenge, a real challenge to the core strength of America? So I believe we have Trevor Loudon online. Hello, sir. You were talking about how there are leftists in Washington who are trying very hard, or who may be able to use and manipulate the weakened America to their leftist political advantage. Can you talk about that?
My contention is absolutely. Now, there are two goals. And the American left, and that includes everybody from the Democratic Party to the unions, to some churches, to a lot of Hollywood, and the communist parties, the Democratic Socialists of America, they want to make sure President Trump doesn't get elected. And President Trump's greatest strength is a strong economy. So if they can destroy the economy or drive us into a depression, that means it's likely that President Trump won't get reelected. So they are absolutely piling into that. They're absolutely doing that. And they want this crisis to go on for as long as possible. They don't want a cure. They don't want people to go back to work. They just want to drag this out forever. Now, worse than that, though, this is being driven out of China. Now, I read the Chinese press, I read the Communist press, and the Communist Party of China International Department issued a call 2 days ago on their website to 230 communist parties around the world. And the basic message is this. This is what we've got to do, people. China's not to blame for this. You cannot blame China for this crisis. You know, China is leading the world in curing this problem. China's sending people to Iran. China's sending ventilators to America. China is the hero in this. And socialized healthcare, which the Chinese have, is the way to handle epidemics. So 3 points. And the fourth point is America is the problem. Trump is the problem. He is endangering people's health. We've got to harp on these themes. Now, these are exactly the themes that our media is picking up on, and they're coming straight out of the Communist Party of China. Now, the one point we've got to understand here, for many years, Obama gutted the US military. You know, he cancelled weapon systems, he reduced troop numbers, he Navy ships, whatever. He left the military at the end of his term the weakest it had been for years, since World War II levels in some cases. Now, the Russians and the Chinese, they know this, and they are building up their military like crazy. Now, President Trump comes into office, and he thinks we've got to correct this. So he starts rebuilding the US military, increasing the Navy, high defense spending, everything that's needed. But he can only do that on the back of a strong economy. If we're in depression, he can't do that. So the Chinese and their Russian and Cuban allies are promoting as much propaganda into this country, creating as much panic and unrest and fear as they possibly can to keep this crisis going so it guts the economy and destroys Trump's military buildup. That's the ultimate goal here. So every time someone like Rahm Emanuel gets up and spouts, he is basically helping the cause of the Chinese Communist Party. I'm sure he doesn't realize that or would agree with that, but that's what he's doing. You imagine the state of this country after 18 months of lockdown. You imagine the riots, the suicides, the business failures, the unemployment, the divorces, whatever would happen. But most of all, imagine where the military would be. The military would be gutted. And who would take advantage of that? China and their friends would take advantage of it. And if you don't think they'd take advantage of it, you've never read a history book, because that's what nations do when other nations get weak. The very least they will do, China's got huge gold reserves. They crashed the economy for 3 months. There will be assets and businesses for sale all over this country, and they will come in and buy everything at fire sale prices. And your job, if you still have one, will be for a Chinese boss, a Chinese Communist Party boss. And they will carry that right through to its military conclusion if they need to. This is ultimately a military propaganda campaign to spread massive fear and discontent in America, to weaken America just after Trump kicked their backsides in trade, just after they had the troubles in Hong Kong, and just after the Taiwanese elections went the wrong way and the Chinese voted for the anti-communist candidate. Chinese were under the gun. Trump's really hurt them. And are they going to wait? Can they handle another 4 years of this? So they are doing this to us. I can't say they deliberately released it. I can't say, I'm agnostic on that, but I can say that absolutely using this crisis for their propaganda advantage, and their real game is to destroy the US military so they become the dominant power in the world. It's as simple as that.
I have to tell you, Trevor Loudon, I wish every American in this country could have heard that brilliant summary of all the advantage that will flow to China as America's economy becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. All the items you just mentioned are so important. And I think for so many Americans, are so possessed and overwhelmed by fear and by the presentation of this virus as being so deadly and alarming and out of control that we've pretty much submitted, our country has, at least to this point, pretty much submitted to what all of the edicts are from local governments, from mayors and city councils, just saying, well, okay, just whatever it takes to make us safe again. And we're not seeing the larger consequences. It is just, I mean, it is the most perfect storm. It's a perfect worst storm, because Americans are so fearful, they're just surrendering to this destruction of our economy.
Yeah, and if you stand against this, you're somehow antisocial and you want people to die. Well, look, you know, I'm not a medical doctor, but I know there's enough people out there who'll tell you this. This is an immunity problem. It's affecting people with compromised immune systems. Why don't we do, and I'm sure President Trump wants to do this, why don't we do what Sweden did and some other countries? You keep the economy going, but you spend the resources on protecting the vulnerable. You know, this is going to kill maybe 20, 30,000 people. And I regret every one of those deaths. I have friends in the age groups that will be vulnerable to this. But the flu kills 30 to 50,000 people every year in this country. And have you ever heard them shut down over the flu? When Obama was in power, the swine flu killed 35,000 people. There was no talk of any shutdown. There was no talk of bringing the economy to a halt. If a Democrat was in the president right now, this would not be happening. This is happening because the left wants to drive this country to its knees. The US left wants to destroy Trump and take power. The Chinese left, who are behind them, want to go even further than that and destroy the US economy so they can clean up financially and even militarily. That's the bottom line here, people. And so we got to go to that approach. We got to ease these restrictions, put the resources in protecting the vulnerable. You know, how many trillions and billions of dollars are we losing in revenue every day? 1% of that could protect every vulnerable, could put every vulnerable American into a plastic, incubator, to completely seal them off from the world. It's not logical. It's driven by fear, and the fear is being driven by our enemies, both domestic and foreign.
1,000% with you. I want to throw in too, you mentioned about shifting our strategy. There were from the right, at the very beginning of the time we were dealing with responding to coronavirus, there were doctors saying, Dr. Katz at Yale and some Stanford professors were talking about, and the terms they used was, we should be using a vertical interdiction, meaning focus our resources on people who are vulnerable or ill, instead of what they contrasted with a horizontal interdiction, force everyone to stay home. These are prominent doctors making the same point, and somehow they don't have Trump's ear, or they are not in a position to arm twist Dr. Fauci, who is the main person advising Trump. And so at least at this point, we're going forward. But I want to switch, I don't know how much time we have. I want to switch to economics for a second. I'm impossibly concerned about the first the third bill, the $2.2 trillion economic stimulus, and they're already talking about the next one to help deal with the crisis. Isn't this another form of weakening America that the left is celebrating and enjoying?
Absolutely. This is, again, inflate the currency. This is rotting America's moral fiber. The left has a meme at the moment. How do you turn a conservative into a socialist? $1,200.
Gosh.
This is what this is rotting our fiber. This is putting the economy in huge danger. The debt problem was already huge as it was. This is beyond rational. This is not rational. But see, Trump has been forced into this to a large degree because the whole left piled in. And if he said, no, we're going to keep the economy open, we're going to be rational about this, every grandmother who died would be on the front page of the news every day up until the election. So he's basically been forced into a position he's have to He's had to do the shutdown, but I think he's itching to get out of it, and that's the best thing to do. And we should be trying. I'm telling people, build support. Tell the president we're ready to come out of this. We've got to get the economy going. We're happy to put the money into protecting the vulnerable. We're all happy to do that. We're not like the Chinese, who basically just let their old people die because they're useless eaters. The Chinese don't care about this. It's just less money on their health bill when these old people die. We don't see human life in those terms. And they are using that. They're using the goodness of this country to damage this country,
to destroy this
country potentially.
Couldn't agree more. Trevor Loudon, I actually mentioned while you were adjusting your camera, you have a new book out. I think it's pretty new. White House Reds, Communist, Socialist, and Security Risks Running for U.S. President. It's a great title, first of all, yes. And you went through all the candidates. I want to ask you, though, because you did go through those. In your book, you're talking about, it's really the mindset or ideology of these people that is just, whether they acknowledge themselves to be socialist Democrats or not, they're leftists, they're Marxists, they are communists. But a lot of people on the left felt like, well, okay, most of them, Elizabeth Warren, really terrible. Bernie Sanders, who dropped out today, by the way, Bernie Sanders.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, but they say, well, but Biden's okay. He's just kind of your mainstream Democrat. That's how Democrats think about him. Tell us why that's wrong.
Look, Biden, I would say, was one of the worst of them. Now, Biden was the protege of a group called the Council for a Livable World, set up by a known Soviet agent in the early 60s, with the objective of electing left-wing senators in small states where you could do it with not much money, and they would then be used to gut the US military. This was a Soviet front. And they put $280,000 into a little Senate race in Delaware in 1972 when a 29-year-old city councilor called Joe Biden was up against a 4-term incumbent Republican with an 80% approval rating, and they won. Ever since that time, Biden has worked in the interests of Moscow to gut the US military. He has cancelled weapons systems. He stood against the nuclear arsenal. He opposed Reagan when Reagan was opposing communism in Latin America. He worked with Obama to negotiate several bad treaties with Russia, which Trump has had to cancel because they were so terrible. In my book, my movie, I've got another movie, Enemies Within, I've got a clip of Joe Biden at the 50th anniversary of this group. The council's been with me all the way. They were there guiding me when I was chaired the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They helped me and Obama negotiate these treaties. He is a complete puppet of a Soviet Moscow front organization, which has done more damage to the US military than anybody could possibly imagine, to the benefit of Moscow and China. He's been a great friend to the mullahs in Iran. He is one of the most dangerous guys on foreign policy you could possibly imagine. And he is the moderate. Buttigieg is a Marxist. Warren is a Marxist. Amy Klobuchar is a Marxist. But Joe Biden is the most dangerous of them all because he is a puppet for enemies of this country.
Please say the name of the group again, the name of the group that got behind him, the council.
Council for a Livable World. Look it up. They have a great big website. They've financed over 200 US senators, including Obama, including Bernie Sanders, and including Elizabeth Warren. All of them are puppets for that group, and that group is a puppet for Moscow. Council for a Livable World. And there's a big long chapter in my book about it, and I profile 9 other Democrats as well, and all of them, every single one of them has a Marxist background. So it didn't really matter who got it. Donald Trump Jr. said on Fox and Friends recently, he said, the 2020 election will be communism versus freedom. And a lot of people thought he was joking. But when you read White House Reds, you'll realize he was not joking. He was right on.
Well, I just downloaded your book this morning on my iPad. I'll confess I haven't had a chance to read it, but I will. White House Reds, Communists, Socialists, and Security Risks, Running for U.S. President 2020. You can find our guest today, Trevor Loudon, on Twitter at New Zeal, as in Zeal, New Zeal blog. We can find his website, Trevor Loudon, TrevorLoudon.com. Great website, full of information. You are just well, you're not, I guess you're not American by birth, but you're an American treasure because of all your just tenacious research and connecting of dots and laying out the connections between people who seem like, I mean, Joe Biden seems like garden variety Democrat American.
Yeah.
And I think just what you just laid out, unknown to most American voters.
Look, there's a real history behind these people, and it's just not out there because the left the media covers for these people, the left-wing media.
They certainly do. And all the points you raised today, I want to kind of summarize again. We were talking about earlier. This battle we have, the coronavirus is not a hoax. The reaction to it is a major problem. And on the American left, you have people very much seeing the weakening of the American economy as just a boulder in the road for President Trump's ability to continue to build up our military, repair our military, and also just what they love more than anything else is to have this horrific struggle we're in continue past election day. We just heard Ezekiel Emanuel saying, 18 months before we all have to stay home before we can even think about lifting these restrictions because of the vaccine. I mean, I don't know how much clearer the left could make it. They are using this crisis to harm and deeply harm America. I'll leave the last wrap up to you.
Look, that's exactly right. Look, if Zeke Emanuel can callously consign over 75-year-olds to death, he doesn't care a lot about the rest of you, and he is a typical elitist socialist. I sort of wonder what he'll do when he comes to 75. He might not be quite so keen to turn down medical treatment. But look, this is a war. This is a global war going on, and the Chinese are using this crisis to maximum effect to destroy America, destroy the economy, destroy your military so they can rule the planet. And the Democrats and the left here, they may not understand the full implications of it, but they want to destroy it to destroy Trump. They are absolutely committed to this. So they'll drag this out for as long as possible. So now's the time to start putting pressure on, get rid of the restrictions, put the resources on protecting those who really need it. The rest of us get out there, make some money, and do what we need to do to make this country prosper.
Amen to that. Trevor Loudon, thank you so much for taking time to join us. It was great talking with you.
A real pleasure anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, my friends, that was Trevor Loudon. I'm so glad we hung in there and got it hooked up. This is a challenge, of course, when we're dealing with our remote setup here, but I love that. And I want to add to make a point about one thing he was saying. There is a petition. I did the White House petition that is called Let Americans Work Again. And on that petition, you can go to our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, top blog article is Sign the Petition. You can click on that link, sign the petition. It is entirely intended to support President Trump. I know from people I know he sees what the left is doing. He does understand what they're doing. He does understand they're using this crisis to undermine America. This is a go President Trump, bring the economy back, let people go back to work petition. I urge you to sign it and share it with your 1,000 best friends. Okay, and that will be the end. Thank you again, Trevor Loudon, so very much. Okay, folks, we are going to turn now. My next topic, it's all coronavirus today. I want to turn and talk about, I called this topic Coronavirus Numbers Expose the Mission. And I want to just lay out some numbers for you, not just numbers, but contrasting them, putting them in context. I'm going to start with a headline. USA Today is a, allegedly respectable, periodical. People read USA Today. They had a headline yesterday which said, 10,000 dead of coronavirus in USA, more fatalities than 6 wars combined. Now, even reading the headline, I'm thinking, what 6 wars? But, the wars they list, the War of 1812, the American Revolution, Mexican War, Indian Wars. Okay, I challenge you, how many people in the street could even tell you what the War of 1812 was? My point is they pick 6 obscure wars, total them up to make a splashy headline saying 10,000 dead of coronavirus in the USA, more fatalities than 6 wars combined. Now, people, I will say this over and over. Of course, I don't want any fatalities. Nobody wants anyone to be suffering, to contract coronavirus, to suffer with COVID-19, No one wants anyone to do that. But this crisis is being exaggerated by the media for the purpose, as you were hearing Trevor Loudon a moment ago, as I was talking about in the introduction, for the purpose of keeping America perpetually feeling fearful and therefore submissive. When you're fearful, people say to the government, anything you say, whatever it is you want me to do, just tell me what. So let me give you some real numbers. Contrast that. So they're saying 10,000 dead of coronavirus in America, and that would be, January, February, March. We're into early April. In any given month, 1 month period in America, we lose about 54,000 Americans to heart disease, 50,000 to cancer, 14,000 to asthma. We have influenza just in a given month, somewhere 4,700 or above. So we have more people dying of all those diseases every month than the entire population in coronavirus since it came to America. On a similar note, we have all the numbers from the CDC. Again, don't want the coronavirus to spread. I want hydroxychloroquine to continue to work, and it is working. And I want them to have a vaccine if that's what people want. But understand the flu season. Just this year in the flu season, we've had 39,000 cases of the flu. 39 million. 39 million cases of flu in America is the low estimate. High estimate, 55 million. And the number of deaths, somewhere between 24,000 and 63,000. So every year we have flu season. Everybody knows when it's flu season. I have friends who are either more fearful or they, generally speaking, aren't that healthy. So during flu season, I have friends who will say, I'm going to stay home. I'm not going out. It's flu season. I don't want to get sick. I understand that. It's a liberty question. If you feel that way, you should stay home. In the coronavirus situation, if you are among the vulnerable population that's susceptible, or if you're just particularly fearful, you should get to stay home. But the left is using numbers that put in context are just, by proportion, very small, but they put them in headlines to scare the daylights out of you. So then you will continue to be submissive to the government. So you have in America, again, you've had so far, and the date of this article, 10,000 dead of coronavirus, was just a few days ago. And yet you have 10,000 dead of coronavirus and somewhere between 24 and 63,000 dead from the flu. Comparing in coronavirus, we're actually up to 12,000 now dead. I go to the CDC website. Every time I mention their numbers on the show, I go to the CDC website, so I have the numbers. Point is, far more flu cases, far more death, far more contraction of flu cases. But we don't in this country shut down everything in this country. But the coronavirus is too great an opportunity as far as left-wingers are concerned in order to stifle and simply crush the American economy. You never see in the context of data like that, 10,000 people dead. Well, how many people in the world have recovered? How many people in the world have recovered, have had coronavirus and come through it and recovered? You have 75,000 in the world and 4,800 recoveries in the U.S. And so these are just, I'm telling you, they raise numbers to alarm people. And actually, something Trevor Loudon said I wanted to expand on and mention to you. Back when Obama was president in his first term, he was really, really trying to push the passage of Obamacare. So what they did to get the American people worked into a lather of frenzy of anger and fear and weakness was to parade individual cases on the stage with people lined up behind the president, they were dressed in doctor's jackets, and I don't think they were all doctors. They're just people, props, and they'd have a family come out who had, either lost a loved one or had a loved one suffer because they couldn't get adequate medical care quickly enough. He used the individual anecdotal narrative to say, look at this terrible case. Look what happened. This case fell through the cracks of the American healthcare system. So therefore, let the federal government take over the healthcare system. This is a tactic the left uses over and over and over. Same thing with that crying nurse in the beginning of the show today. They want, and CBS wants, people like her breaking down in sobs so that all you're thinking is, oh my gosh, we don't have enough masks. We're sending nurses into COVID-19 patient hospital areas with no masks. This is horrible. This is a terrible healthcare system, and President Trump is screwing it up. This is the entire reason they do these things. They don't care if the stories are true. They don't check if the stories are true. If they can get it out there to hurt Trump and hurt America, they're all about that. Next thing on the numbers, we've talked on the show several times recently about the predictions that with respect to coronavirus infection rates, hospitalization rates, death rates. They all come from models. And as I've said over and over, it matters. Models only spit numbers out at the end based on what number somebody put in the beginning. The models are all about the data you put in to start with and the assumptions you weave into the models. So just recently, just yesterday, the CDC director announced that the virus death toll that we've all forced to stay in our homes, lock down the economy, shut down unessential businesses, embolden the police state mindset in some people, all based on models. The CDC, the virus death toll announced by Dr. Robert Redfield, the head of the CDC, virus death toll will be much, much lower than the models. In particular, the one model that we have been talking about on the show very often, because it was a model that comes from Gates money. But Bill Gates, his institute that he funds, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME, huge model maker. IHME models drove decisions around this country to shut down everything, including where I live, Dallas County. They also drastically adjusted down their estimates of number of infection rates, hospitalizations, and deaths. People, we are being driven by models, which, as you step back, remember what Trevor Loudon was just saying, models that aid the left in their ability to expand their power over Americans. And that is what we are doing in this country. That is where we are. Another big data point to keep in mind as we continue, as we should, to question how long should America stay locked in their homes. If you ask Ezekiel Emanuel, somewhere between 12 and 18 months, a year or more, we should all stay home. Every business you've ever heard of will shutter and shut down, except vital ones like, pharmaceuticals, drugstores, grocery stores, the food industry will have to survive because we have to eat. Short of that, everything else will shut down in this country. As you heard Trevor Loudon say, the military will not be able to get the funding they need from Washington because everything we have in Washington is being funneled to pay the Americans because of the damage inflicted on the economy, because what the government did to the economy. But one other metric to keep in mind, the reason in Dallas, because I've pressed some of my friends who are these are hugely politically active friends. They supported and went along with what we have in Dallas, which is a total shutdown in this county. I mean, you can get stopped for being out and driving if you are, and they can ask you if you're on an essential errand or not. Now, I'm not saying that happens very much because pretty much in Texas, we still have the spirit of liberty, but I'm telling you, this is what this system is they're setting up. But the reason the IHME models drove the decisions to shut down cities around this country and states around this country was because of the fear of a shortage of hospital beds. And that was the answer I got from my political friends when I'd say, how can you support this? You have, we can do social distancing and hand washing and everything. We're, keeping, not shaking hands, no hugging, all this. We can do that and still work. But the answer was the fear of increased infection because we're not going to have sufficient hospital beds. That was the argument around the country. So people started doing, you probably saw Candace Owens and others on Twitter were saying, film a hospital. Go yourself to your local hospital. Film a hospital. To make the point that although there are hospitals in this country with massive crowding and massive COVID-19 problems, mostly New York City, Seattle has a problem, New York City has a problem, most of the rest of the nation does not. In fact, hospitals are quieter. I mean, because they, in most places, outlawed elective surgery. So all these people finally going in to get their knee replaced or whatever the elective surgery is had to be put off, told, sorry, you can't come to the hospital. So we have empty hospitals around this country. This whole thing started on Twitter. People started filming because at first just a story was being told that hospitals are really, really empty, and nurses were coming online, putting things on Twitter like, hey, you know, I work at this hospital. We have nothing to do. We don't have any patients. There's nobody here. We have 0 or only 1 or 2 COVID-19 patients, and everything else has been shut down. But here's actually data, not just anecdotal stories and anecdotal pictures, actual data. And this is from the BeckersHospitalReview.com. This is actually an official site that keeps track of hospital data, and hospitals turn in their data to this organization. So the fact that hospitals around this country, with the exception of the hot spots where they do have a problem and we have to be helping them, we have to be getting them adequate supplies and masks and everything else they need and ventilators. And I'm going to tell you folks, by the end of 2020, we're going to have a surplus of ventilators, masks, protective gowns, protective shields they've been building for people who work in banks and grocery stores, other places. We're going to have an abundance because all these precious American countries jumped into gear, leaped into gear, and adjusted their companies to produce what America needed. But I want to get to the hospital data. There is a story out in the actual official BeckersHospitalReview.com. They're talking about finance. It's a page dedicated to financial information about hospitals and how they're doing. 59 hospitals in this country right now, in the midst of this coronavirus crisis, are furloughing workers. Furloughing meaning putting you out on time. You're on timeout. You're sent home because they don't have any customers. We have MUSC Health, an 8-hospital system based in Charleston, South Carolina, said it was going to be temporarily laying off 900 employees. This is one hospital system. MUSC Health, 8-hospital system based in Charleston, South Carolina, temporarily laying off 900 employees, or 5% of its workforce, to offset the financial hit caused by the COVID temporary layoffs. Don't affect non-clinical, blah, blah, effective April 7th. Non-clinical employees at Peoria, Illinois-based OSF Healthcare will be subject to mandatory time off or will be furloughed. And I could keep reading these, but they have priority given to COVID-19, which is, right. People in a desperate pandemic, you've got to take care of them first. But the fact is, they have, I'll go another one, citing a revenue and patient volume reduction. The Holyoke, Massachusetts-based Valley Health Systems has furloughed 225 employees, or about 11% of its workforce. Odessa in Texas Regional Medical Center has furloughed 60 employees to offset a revenue loss because they don't have patients coming in. You can go on and on and on, all 59, and you can read this on my website, americacanwetalk.org. Read this. I'm getting at the point that we have been in this segment. I'm trying to drive home the point. We have been in this country manipulated into overreacting to a horrible disease. COVID-19 is real. Coronavirus is real. Our reaction is a manipulated reaction, and the numbers begin to expose that for us. The numbers begin to expose that we don't have the hospitalization shortage predicted. We don't have the caseload that we were supposed to have. We don't have the hospitalization rate we're supposed to have. We don't have the death rate we're supposed to have. We have a media dedicated and determined to keeping America in a state of frenzy, panic, and fear, and therefore, just ready to accept whatever the government edict is. And in the middle of all that, our economy has been shut down, is in ruins. Our economy itself is in ruins. We have no legal right at this time for business owners to reopen. So I'm getting at these points at the start of the show. I still have one more second, but the point from the start of the show, this problem is real. The virus is real. The reaction is a malicious manipulation. It's a problem in America. The numbers don't justify the reaction. Leftists in America and enemies of America like China are loving seeing America weakened. And I can't urge you strong enough, if you missed the interview from Trevor Loudon, listen to the points he was making. America weakened is destroying the entire Trump mission to build up America again and build up our military and build up our strength. It's being used by the left to try to destroy President Trump so he doesn't get a second term. Vaccine globalist mission is my last topic I'm going to turn to. And I just want to, I've touched on this a few other times in the show this week, but I feel like I've got to hit it again just to make clear a few points about the people involved in setting this policy. Number one, in this policy we are all looking at, coming out of Washington, it's largely being driven by Dr. Fauci, who is with NIH. You know, he's been there since 40 plus years he's been there. He is not only an institution in Washington, he is very much the leader of, a signaler of the policies that the medical community around the country, he's in the cabal of leaders. He sets the tone, he sets the standard, he tells people what will be and what is true. For some of our listeners, I want to mention to you, because on this whole subject of the globalist mission, I've had emails and notes from people on Facebook and notes from listeners on YouTube and email. Anyone can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. People saying you've got to get this Dr. Shiva on your show, Shiva, Dr. Shiva on your show. His actual full name is Shiva Ayurjaya. I want to tell you that I did have a long conversation with him over the weekend. Long conversation directly. I am going to work toward having him on the show. I think the topic is so big about how we handle immunizations, how we handle viruses, that we need to be orderly and segmented in how we approach it. But I agree, he has a lot of value to add. One point he's very clear about is that Dr. Fauci is of the school of thought that essentially we have this virus, coronavirus, and the only method possible to handle it, in the view of people like Fauci and Dr. Birx, Dr. Deborah Birx, Birx, who is also advising President Trump, is to pursue the vaccine, the development of a vaccine, as what they see as the only reasonable way to handle this. They see this as the panacea, the utopia, the way you solve this problem. So you have them advising President Trump very much every chance they get, even though recently Dr. Fauci kind of hedged a little bit and said maybe hydroxychloroquine is kind of okay. He's still in the camp. The real answer is to get to a vaccine. And I'm wanting to raise with you the idea that, first of all, as the number of doctors in this country grows, the number grows of doctors who are saying in public, in the media, to the media, we have found hydroxychloroquine or some other combination of hydroxychloroquine and other things it's combined with, we have found that to be highly effective in bringing about the recovery of coronavirus patients, of COVID-19 patients. It's really important to understand when you have those voices and yet they are pretty much repressed from the federal level. You have Fauci pushing for the vaccine. You have Ezekiel Emanuel, the clip from the beginning of the show, pushing the idea that the answer, the solution is, of course, only to get us around to having a vaccine. And then when everyone's been vaccinated, then we can all go about our business. Of course, by then the Trump presidency is ruined, America First is ruined, the economy is ruined, but hey, they'll have their vaccine. I want to hit some other points about Dr. Shiva, who is doing a great job making the point in media over and over and over that it's not just that Dr. Shiva is saying that Fauci is, driven to support the vaccine method, but he's also pointing out that the entire medical understanding of the immune system, which he is an expert talking about. Dr. Shiva is saying this is, what the way that the Fauci and Birx kind of doctors are approaching this is very old-fashioned, old-school medical thought. There's far more advanced medical thought today about the immune system, how to protect us, than what is being pushed by Fauci and Birx. So that's one point to make, is that there's a challenge even to the idea that the only way to get on top of the coronavirus is to let the vaccine be developed. So there is a true medical question. The call, I was on a call where people were doctors were on debating back and forth about whether or not hydroxychloroquine should be used when you're asymptomatic, but you're in the category should it use preventative, should it be used in treatment? It's just a big discussion about how it's used. I'm not a doctor or a medical person really, but I do know that doctors care and want to use this, and it's troublesome to have Dr. Fauci and Dr. Burke so demeaning about the use of hydroxychloroquine. Next thing I want to say about the use of this whole issue related to vaccines. We mentioned the other day, I think a couple days ago, about the idea that Bill Gates is a huge advocate of essentially the idea that vaccines are a fundamental key to getting to lifting the entire world out of poverty. He is very supportive of the World Health Organization, UN Agenda 2030, which is allegedly going to free everyone in the world from poverty, hunger, homelessness, all the problems that befall mankind, poverty and sickness and everything else. A huge element in getting to that utopian view of the world is to vaccinate everybody. So Bill Gates is just determined to be a force demanding vaccines. Well, it's a really interesting thing because there is so his connections, to be clear, Bill Gates is connected very, very closely with Dr. Fauci, who is the one giving President Trump advice and is so far seeming to derive the narrative in this country, how we deal with coronavirus. And Bill Gates is also closely connected with Dr. Birx. So they have combined interests. They have interest in pushing the vaccine as the solution to this entire problem. So, in some ways, President Trump is really in a battle, not just to help America get through the coronavirus, but he's in a battle with, wanting America to be healthy, but recognizing the only solution that's okay with Bill Gates is to push vaccines, and that Mr. Vaccine Bill Gates and Fauci and Birx are all very, very connected. So as one little piece of it, there are all sorts of conferences that have gone on where you see that Gates has actually, has actually pushed this agenda to the to the quite extreme of getting the vaccines as the number one way to go. I realize I've gone long on my time. It's a little different than the show at home, so I probably have to wrap up. But I want to mention one other piece to tease it for next week. We'll talk more about the vaccine issue. But I want to mention one thing that's a danger to American freedom before I get to why it matters to you, and that is this: in England already, they are, of course, experiencing this challenge of coronavirus also. There is a doctor he is actually the UK Health Secretary named Matt Hancock in the UK, the UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who is floating the idea that in order for people to be free of the shelter-in-place rules they have over there, in order for people to be for life to resume, they're going to have to start issuing immunity certificates, so that you will be held to the standards and rules they are putting in place until you can show an immunity certificate, meaning you prove you got vaccinated. Well, I want to ask you just how far away you think America is from that. You might think that's crazy. We don't do things like that in this country. We have freedom. We wouldn't have somebody who would push that. I'm telling you, folks, the idea that someone like Fauci wanting to continue to push which he is financially invested in, he is connected at the hip to Bill Gates, and involved in all sorts of organizations working to develop vaccines to coronavirus, which may then become mandatory or quasi-mandatory. We may not be that far away from that in this country. This is why I'm telling you, leftist powers in this country are using the coronavirus to expand their power. Fauci in particular would greatly benefit if the vaccine were developed and to be viewed to be effective and safe for coronavirus, from having us move toward more of a mandated vaccine mode in our country, simply because he's claiming it's the only thing that will help, and also because, of course, he would stand to benefit from that. And so I apologize to my Matt, the wonderful producer, because I am actually over time. This is we're just kind of rocking, doing the best we can. But I want to turn and talk to you about why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started in our very first topic for the day: coronavirus, America manipulated. CBS airs The Crying Nurse, a false portrayal by a mentally disturbed individual but one that stokes fear and panic. Ezekiel Emanuel, architect of Obamacare, an advocate for socialized medicine, an advocate for you ought to just give up and die when you're 75, in a public interview says shutdown should extend for 12 to 18 months. This is an anti-American agenda, period, full stop. USA Today goes with headline proclaiming 10,000 deaths, more battlefield fatalities in 6 wars combined, shameless cherry picking of war data for hysteria mongering. America's enemies are loving all of this. That should signal the need to change course. And as to the next topic we had today, coronavirus numbers expose the mission. Bill Bennett, and you got to read this article. It's on our website. It's by Bill Bennett. I was having some numbers from there. Cites hard data, a 98% recovery rate. I forgot to even say that. The recovery rate for coronavirus in this world is 98%. 98%. And yet our economy is shut down and in ruins. Bill Bennett cites hard data, 98% recovery rate for COVID-19 patients, dispatches from hospitals. 59 are furloughing employees because bans on elective surgeries have left them empty, which means they're not occupied by COVID-19 patients. COVID-19 deaths as of yesterday, less than 13,000, with acknowledged grotesque over-reporting because CDC says if the COVID played any role at all in the person's death, choose COVID as the cause of death. CDC estimated regular flu deaths this year somewhere between 24 and 63,000. Is a common sense question still allowed? Why is the nationwide shutdown necessary? And finally, coronavirus vaccine prescription explained. Fauci, Birx, and Bill Gates are involved professionally and financially in the mantra of vaccines are the only solution. Maybe they're right, but maybe they're wrong. Shouldn't Americans be aware of their interests? They have a bias toward vaccine. It leads to social distancing rather than exposure and building immunity. It leads to wait it out as vaccines are developed, rather than the vertical, siloed treatment that they should have, necessarily discounts and disputes other remedies, especially hydroxychloroquine. Not every medical expert, not even close to every medical expert, shares the bias in favor of vaccines. Dr. Shiva is all over the internet protesting Fauci and Birx and Gates. President Trump and all of America deserve a second opinion. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you for listening. America Can We Talk, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Love talking with you every day. Encourage you to do all the things on social media. You know what they are. Follow, share, tweet. I love talking about America. I love the opportunity to share with you my just great appreciation for the unique greatness of America. Thank you for listening to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.